All right, so here we are today with another daily upload and the first of a brand new series I really want to try to introduce called Gamemode Dreams. And specifically, we're looking at Hardcore Factions, which is a series that I've had a lot of history with, had a lot of good adventures with, and I put out a fourth video about sort of how I did so well in the game mode. But the series Gamemode Dreams is essentially going to be looking at a particular game mode that's either in beta or doesn't exist at all yet, or just exists in my thoughts and my dreams, and looking at why I think it's so cool, why I'd love for it to be out a reality, and literally just telling more people about it. Because I mean, that's sort of what happened with Hardcore Tactical. We just told a bunch of people about it. Like, the more people who know about it, the more people who could possibly be interested in it, the more likely it is to actually exist or to come into existence. So there are a couple of different game modes that I've thought about that I really want to push hard to exist. This video is going to be a lot of like history and a lot of what's happened to bring us to here, to figure out where we need to go from here. But I have some other videos, other Game Mode Dreams videos planned that I think will be much more interesting than this one. But yeah, from beta test to a repeatable game mode. Game Mode Dreams, Hardcore Factions. So, a little update on the history. I'll move through this really fast because it's a lot of just reiterating stuff that's already happened, and some of the people who will watch this video will be people who were actually there, so they don't really need to hear this again. But essentially, if you've watched these videos, these three were from the first beta test ever, and then this video was my advice as someone who participated in the first beta test and did really well for people about the second beta test, which just happened. There was a second one. The first one was 5 days long, but the second one was 3 days long. And my my personal conspiracy theory is that the reason why it only lasted 3 days, or they only scheduled it for 3 days, is because it only took my team 3 days to win the first one. My team snowballed really hard with a really aggressive strategy and a lot of planning, and we did really well. And we snowballed super hard to just have a extreme domination victory in 3 days. And so they actually disbanded our faction for days 4 and 5, which is why there aren't 4 and 5 videos for that. I was not in the second one. I did not record any of it. I asked people on the Discord and they didn't have any of it either, so I'm not entirely sure how it went. I did hear some things in the Discord about sort of some people's opinions about it. And so here's some changes about what I heard. And I think these are generally good changes. So most people are in factions, but there are some people who are not. They're just solo, and those people are called hedge knights. In the prior game, hedge knights were just like getting absolutely bullied by everyone, and I mean, you kind of understand why, because if you're not in a faction, you don't have any area to store your stuff. It's really hard to like keep your things safe. You're very likely just going to get bullied over and over again and just really, really poor. But that kind of sucks, because some of the rules that they had for hedge knights were like, they have undroppable weapons, which kind of invalidates the entire point of hard tactical, which is just feels it puts a poor taste in my mouth. So they gave the hedge knights some buff rules, some secondary, tertiary buffs, which I think was a good idea. And the other thing that I think was a really good idea is there were more anti-faction weapons. In the last week, they had some anti-faction sort of things, but in this one they really ramped that up, specifically with tactical nukes and base busters. So things where you could walk up to a base, you could destroy their force field around their base, and you could go in and raid them. I think raiding bases should be one of the most important parts of hardcore factions, because the whole point of it is really like everybody has a limited amount of stuff and the factions stockpile it, and so you want to break in and steal their stockpiles. Like, that just makes sense. So base busters, tactical nukes to kill a bunch of people, and then hedge knight buffs, obviously just make them stronger because they're so cripplingly poor. It's just sort of a shame. But the biggest change is that I wasn't there. Had I been there, I would have planned harder and would have snowballed again. But from what I heard, I think hedge knights more won the week because there wasn't as many aggressive factions, and there wasn't a need for factions to team up to face my faction because I wasn't there to have a faction. So a little bit less of a faction-based one for that particular one, a little bit more hedge knight-based from what I've heard. I'm not entirely sure. If you have a different opinion, you can leave that in the comments. But that's some update on history. So the reason why, or what it looks like, or why it would be cool, this is getting back away from the history and more towards like the game mode just as a theory, as a dream. essentially some of the biggest differences between classical AIC like Dominion or Capture the Flag and Hardcore Factions is that your team size is way smaller and there's a much different weapons meta. And part of the things that go into that meta is that everything and anything you make can be used against you, and speed crafting is more important than anything else. So you literally do not have any allotted time to build stuff other than while you could otherwise be fighting. And so because of that, certain weapons meta change. Some of those I find unfortunate, and I'll get into that. But some I found really, really cool, like printing out just tons and tons of one-handed swords. And so everyone's a scout class, because if you built a vanguard to give you an advantage, but then you died and lost it, it would be used against you. So a lot of difference between like the actual sort of like what the game looks like. But the biggest difference between Classic and HCF is aggression management. There's a much different series of strategies for aggression management in Hardcore Factions that I really, really enjoy. They're very, very high-level logistics, high-level strategy that you don't see very much in Capture the Flag. Because in Capture the Flag, you have 90 minutes to go all-out war, and you just sort of raid your opponent's base over and over and over again, and then you get their flags, and then they raid your base over and over again. But in HCF, it's so much more about who has what, how much they have, could you take them if you fought, and if you can't, what can you do about it to make yourself more powerful. It's a lot more sophisticated aggression that I really, really enjoy, and I think is part of the funnest part about a fighting game like ASC, because really, I do definitely believe that aggression is the most complicated part of Adventures in Cardboard. Figuring out when to fight and when not to is literally the hardest lesson. It's so much harder than doing anything else, than building armor, than telling stories, anything. Figuring out when or when not to show aggression, or the management of it, is the most fun part. And HCF takes aggression management just to a whole nother level. So it's a really, really cool game mode. So again, the best part about AIC is you're able to pick your battles. When you want to strike, you can strike really fast and really hard. You can crush your opponent because you spent all this time sitting and waiting and looking for an opportunity. You out-strategy them by managing your own aggression, and then you channel all of your aggression all at once. That's literally what we did during our run. We just didn't attack anyone, except for when we absolutely needed to. And then when we had all the power, we just roll over the earth like a sea of boiling rock or something, like lava, and just annihilated everyone. So different logistics, different planning, that we were just built different from the start. We crushed that week. And I truly believe that with some of these sophisticated aggression management strategies, you could pretty much crush any week you went into. Yeah, HCF takes that to the highest level. It's the place where you're able to show off aggression management the most. Also, one of the other things that makes it really, really fun is that it's an extremely customizable game mode from like a player side of things, because there's very little that's random. You pick your teammates, you pick your base location, you pick who you fight and when, you pick how you fight, who you fight and when, and you pick where you fight, who you fight, how you fight and when. It's all up to you. If you are smart and you do well, you can win. But if you're foolish, then you'll lose. As where in a normal week of ASC, you don't pick your teammates, you don't pick your base location. People can come and just attack you. You can't really hide away or run away from anyone because you have a base and you have flags and there's a certain amount of time, and your respawn is always at the same spot. It's just a lot less freedom in a normal week, and there's a lot more freedom in HCF, which is why I really enjoy it. There's levels of decision making that are just another echelon above that really allow for pretty much anything you choose to happen. It's a very advanced game mode. It's definitely harder tactical. So, where I think HCF/Hardtac fits in. I would really love if it was a supplemental game mode to ASC's roster. They do 3 types of weeks so far: theatrical, classical, and tactical. I don't necessarily think that Hardtac is supposed to be a whole week-long event. I think it's better as a supplemental, but I'll get into that. But I really enjoy the idea that there's tactical weeks, which are teaching you the start of some of these like sophisticated aggression management things, but pretty much at tactical, it's just aggressive mobs of people with swords, and the older your mob is, the better they are at fighting. Like, that's essentially all there is to it. But at hardtack, even if you have a bunch of old kids who are really aggressive, they can still get mobbed by a bunch of smart kids who know what they're doing. And much higher level of competitivity and a little bit less hand holding, because at tactical, you're still very contained by the rounds. You're contained about where you can put stuff, contained about when you can do stuff. And at hardtack, there's just less of that. You're just more free. Again, I'm not sure if hardcore factions, hard tactical might be a more blanket. The reason why I make a distinction between the two names is I really think hardcore factions, like where you're all in little self-sorted factions, and if you kill someone, they drop weapons, is sort of like a specific game mode. Like Dominion is the game mode you play at tactical. Hardcore factions is the game mode you play at hard tactical, but there could be other game modes you also play at hard tactical. In its current form, I don't think hardcore factions is right for a week-long camp. The first beta was 5 days, and we won it in 3. The second beta was 3 days, and I don't think there was actually a conclusion. 1 day for a single like supplemental event just doesn't seem right, but 5 days seems almost too long. You would either have a victory in the first couple days, or if no one there is going to be able to snowball into a victory in 5 days, then it's going to take so long, or just no one ever will. Part of the deal with this is that there's certain length of play things required for certain developments. So the biggest thing that I was rather shocked about, and I'll probably make a video on later, is it takes a really long time to build stuff. Like, I know that's going to sound kind of stupid because I've made all this armor and it's taken me years to make all of it. But like, I felt like I, as an armor smith, could design a really simple plan and just print out a set in like an hour or two. And it really took me more than that. It really took me like several hours. It took me like 3 or 4 days to get like a half set of armor to use. And even then, I really didn't get to use it all that much since we had already won by the time that I had all this stuff. It's one of those things where we were already doing so well before I had armor that I really just didn't need it. It's just not possible to build multiple sets of armor in a week and play, unless, of course, your whole team just sits down and builds stuff. And after doing that, they're losing because they should just be out there fighting. And if they were just out there fighting, they would win without needing to build stuff. So it's just not really meta. It's just the time required for armor to be efficient. Like if it was a month-long event, and by the end of the month, every single person on the field had armor, and each faction had like 10 plus sets of armor, so that if you died and lost one, you could go get another one, or you would kill your opponents and pick up a couple sets. It's just not really right. With the length of the game mode in its current form, I really think it should be a short supplemental event, not really like a week long, or not more than a week long. Ideally, okay, so this is where the meta should sit. I don't think that like month-long events where everyone has armor make sense. I think they should be a little bit shorter, but it needs to be long enough for a faction to actually amass weapons and stuff and have a stockpile at the end of the event so that they can win. But also, they need to be able to win without it being like there are 10 swords in the realm for 40 people and we have 9 of them. Like, everyone's poor. Like, it needs to be like, there are 60 swords in the realm, we have 30 of them, and we're a 5-man faction out of 40 people. So, like, you're definitely winning, and everyone else isn't poor. But that's where the meta should sit, and so the length of the game should be corresponding to how long it takes for that to develop. Which, again, I just think the only way to figure that out is just to do more betas. I think it should be a couple of 3-day betas, just beta tests, and just amass more data on how factions develop and how long it takes for those sorts of things to happen. I sort of knew this, but I really think that what happened with my team in Hard Tactical was really a result of having... I was talking with another one of my faction members, Rohan, at last week, and we were realizing that between the 6 faction members, we probably had like 40 years of combined AIC experience. Like unironically 4 decades of time. Because I had 9 years, Rohan had 10, George had like 6, Zeke had like 4, Declan had like also 10, like 40 or more years of time with a lot of us combined. It was absurd. And so maybe that's not reasonable for other, that shouldn't be assumed to be the norm. It should be an extreme outlier. And the outlier was that I gathered this power faction, and power factions maybe don't necessarily always occur. Or maybe after a couple weeks, there'll be enough people who are veterans who have been a part of small factions who band together and build a power faction, and then it will become more common. But either way, we just need more data. We just need to experience more things, get a sense for how long it takes for one faction to snowball into a win. Maybe our snowball was more of a forced snowball just because we were so good. Had we have not been in a power faction, just hedge knights or whatever, we still would have won because we were so good. I don't really know. We just need to see. We need to run more games and see. And that's it for me today for Adventures in Cardboard. Glad you stopped by for another daily upload for Gamemode Dreams. I would love to do more betas. I'd love to be a part of more betas and record them for content for AIC. But for today, at least, that's it for me. As always, their website, Instagram, YouTube. Thanks for stopping by, and best of luck. See you tomorrow.